Hello everybody and welcome to another how-to video from Vintage Fans and More. Today I'm going to show you how to install this remote kit into a fan where it wouldn't normally fit. This method of installation is particularly useful on Casablanca fans using the Hang-Tru canopy. It could also be useful for IntelliTouch, Advantage, or Comfort Touch fans that have been converted to a single or 3-speed system in the case that you don't want to modify the fan's appearance or it's unfeasible to mount a pull chain in the particular fan. This method of installation is not for fans that utilize a direct drive or spinner motor, DC motors, or any kind of fan that uses an integral control system, such as IntelliTouch or Comfort Touch. If that system is still installed on the fan, you don't want to utilize this installation. While this method is most useful with Casablanca fans, it can be used with essentially any fan that has predominantly stationary parts in the motor housing. That's going to be typically your flywheel-based fans, K55, XLP motors, fans of that nature, as long as there's physical room to fit the remote receiver into the fan's motor housing. So without any further delay, let's get started. Before jumping right into it, I should mention that while this method of installation is perfectly safe, most manufacturers wouldn't recommend mounting a remote control receiver this way. So if you're the original owner of your fan and it's under warranty, I wouldn't recommend going with this method because it may void your warranty with the manufacturer. Moving on to what you'll need to complete the installation, you're going to obviously need the fan that you're installing the remote kit in. I'm using the basic Casablanca Panama here. The remote kit that you'll be installing in the fan, I'm using Casablanca's 99019 4-speed remote kit. The brand of the remote and the fan don't necessarily have to match. You can install basically any of the generic remote kits in any brand of fan. You'll need some spare lengths of fixture wire, long enough to make it up the entire length of your downrod. Obviously mine are pretty short because I'm using the standard downrod length. Some zip ties to tie the remote receiver down in the motor housing. There are other methods of doing this, but I find zip ties are the easiest. A wire stripper and wire nuts for making the wiring connections, as well as a variety of tools to take your fan apart. That's going to vary by manufacturer and model of fan that you're dealing with. So I will start with disassembling my fan. Basically, you need to gain access to the top of the motor where the wiring goes down the shaft and also inside of the motor housing itself. So I'll start with taking off the downrod. Then I will remove the Perma coupler. Next, I'll open up the motor housing. And now we can begin the remote installation. So first, you want to go to the top of the fan. You're going to take the 3 wires, and you can see where these other wires are going through down into the motor. You want to follow those through. It helps if you twist them together. And you want to feed them down through the top of the motor. And you're looking to come out one of these vents inside the housing. And you want to pull them down until they're pretty tight up top. So now you have your 3 wires inside the motor housing. You're going to take your new lengths of wires and feed them back up through one of the vents to the top of the motor, and those will be your new power feeds. So again, I twist them together. Alright, so you have your wires coming out through the top of the motor. and the tail's coming out inside the motor housing. Now this process of feeding the wires down through the motor and back out through the top can vary based on what manufacturer you're dealing with and what model fan you're dealing with. Sometimes you might have to sneak the wires around between the motor and the housing. There's no really one way to do this part of the process. Basically, you're just going to have to find out the best way to do it on your particular fan. So now we go inside the housing. I'm going to strip back my 2 new wire leads. And then you take your remote receiver and basically follow the directions that come with the receiver for how you'd hook it up. These will be your line in or power wires. Obviously these will be the fan wires, fan out or load wires. So I'll just go ahead and wire in my receiver. So I have my receiver completely wired in. Now this is an optional step. Oftentimes I like to wrap my wire connections in electrical tape, not necessarily for electrical safety, but because it helps conceal all of the wiring within the motor housing. If everything is black or mostly black inside, you're not going to notice it as much, potentially through a vent screen. So that's just one thing that I like to do for the aesthetics of the fan itself. So now we're at the slightly tedious task of concealing all of this inside the motor housing. Normally I try to take the side of the receiver that doesn't have wires coming out of it and get that flush up against the top of the motor housing. Then I can tuck my wires away to the sides as necessary. And I use zip ties to hold the receiver in place. You may have to cut some holes in your vent screen for a zip tie to pass through. This fan has foam vent screen, so it basically just pokes right through. So I just bring it across the top of a vent. Bring it back down through. If your zip ties were long enough, mine are not, you could do it in one zip tie. And just be careful that you don't pinch any wires. So clip off the tails so they don't get in the way. And that's pretty well secured now. So now I want to make sure all my wires are out of the way. This is where electrical tape could come in handy again. You can kind of tie them down in bundles. You could also use smaller zip ties to tie the wires out of the way. For the sake of demonstration, I'm not going to get too deep into securing these out of the way, but basically you want to make sure that they're not going to move once you install the fan. So make sure they're very well tied down. At this point, you begin reassembly of the fan, and once you finish that, it'll be ready to install. As you go to install your fan, it's a simple 2-wire connection. If your previous installation used the optional 3rd wire, you just want to cap that and tuck it away. Otherwise, it's simply black to black, white to white, and green to green, or bare copper. If your fan uses an integrated control system like variable speed or a pull chain, it's good practice to make sure that the fan itself is on high speed to ensure optimal remote performance. To ensure your fan is on high speed, select the high speed setting on the remote, and then sequence the pull chain, stopping on high speed. And there we have it. It really is that easy. A remote installation that's simple and won't change the outer appearance of your fan. If you enjoyed today's how-to video, be sure to let me know in the comments below, or you can tag me on social media. Those links are always in the description. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.